Well, you just watched me do a time-lapse video of the creation of this image. I didn't use any reference or really have a plan for it. I just kind of sat down and drew it. I did the whole thing with a brush. The drawing itself, the sketch, it was let's say like a maybe 10 width or 12 width brush. I did lower the opacity a little for the sketch stage. Then I made another layer and I went back over with a heavier, thicker brush, higher opacity to sort of solidify my line work. I patched in the background. I made it sort of abstract to start and just kind of built it in. And then after I'd done all that, I painted over this character in the foreground holding the daffodil with a mid-tone gray. And I think I did the same thing to the background. And I put like a gradient back there. And after I'd done all that, I used the burn and dodge tools, similar to what we did whenever we were working on that sphere, to map out all of my values. Now I could have painted them in. I could have used black and white to paint them in. I could have done it in an overlay layer. In fact, I could still even at this point go back in if I wanted to, make a new layer, new overlay layer. Come in with my brush. Probably want to make sure that it's rather small for this. Check my opacity, and I could come in here and just paint right back on top of what's already there and bring out stronger areas of highlight if I wanted to get really detail oriented with it. Once you've got a base to work from, you go back in and you start doing the little things like zooming in real close and worrying about all the little details that you can get. I'm not going to do that because that would mean you'd have to watch me do this tutorial for 30 plus hours, because sometimes that's how long a finished piece of work takes. Art takes time. You have to keep looking over it and making adjustments, and then maybe once you get to the point where you really know what you're doing, you'll be able to finish an image overnight, depending upon how many hours you work on it and how good your workflow is. So you just have to be patient with yourself and be willing to devote the time. So what I'm going to do today, the next thing that I want to demonstrate to you, can be done with a black and white photograph. So you could use a photograph for what I'm going to do. You don't have to do a drawing like this unless you really want to, unless you like to draw and you want to give it a shot. You could even scan or take a photo of maybe an old drawing that you've done and do this on top of it. As long as you're starting with the black and white, this will all make good sense, I think. My idea here, now that I've got a strong light source and everything is pretty well mapped, like I said, I could keep noodling away at this, I gotta stop. What I want to do is I want to use gradient maps in order to add some kind of overall tone to parts of my image that I can then work on top of and continue painting. And we get this really nice rich surface from all these different layers. And it'll make it look that much more like a traditional painting if you've layered it than if you just went straight to the local color. What I need to do at this point in order to do effective gradient mapping is I need to separate out a lot of these different parts. And in order to do that, I'm going to use a selection tool. Now you could use any of the lasso tools we've used. Polygonal lasso tool would be good for, geometric shapes. The magnetic lasso tool will latch itself onto the edge of shapes. I don't know how accurate that's going to be, so I'm just going to go with the regular lasso tool. And I'm going to start off here. Since I'm using this stylus, I'm going to have a pretty easy time, because I think using a mouse or a trackpad makes this a little bit more challenging, because it's hard to be accurate when you don't have something that's got a nice point on it, easy to control. I'm going just outside of her hairline, trying to kind of stay outside that little bit of a outer glow I added. Now I'm going to go all the way back here, trace around my edges. Okay, so I've got the background selected, and I'm just going to Command copy and then paste into its own layer. Coming back to the background, let's do this. I'm going to do one more of these. Try to go around some of this foliage. And I'm just sectioning off the open area between the trees. I might want to do that a little bit differently than the way that I do the trees with my gradient map. So I've got that section selected. I'm going to hold in Shift, come over here and add a couple more sections to that. Alright, Command Copy, Command Paste. So I've got the trees and I've got the background. Again, coming back, still with my Lasso Tool. This time I'm going to do her hair. I'm going to keep her hair separate from the rest of what I want to do. This will make sense when I actually do it. So just trust the process. Trust what I'm doing here. Going around the daffodil shape. You know, I could try to be really accurate with this and zoom in, but I'm just not that worried about it. You always remember that the difference between a professional and an amateur is a professional is willing to go back and rework things, take things to the nth degree, and work obsessively to complete something to a high standard. Now, there are times when I am certainly a professional about things. Maybe to my detriment, I'm not being one right now. I hope I'm not setting a bad example for you. I just wanted to show you an example of how this works. And then it will be up to you, whenever you go to do your own, just how obsessive you want to be about it. Okay, so I've got the hair selected. Command Copy, paste into its own section. Make sure you're in the right layer. Every time you got to go back to that original layer. You're not copying any part of it. Okay, so the last thing that I need to take care of is the daffodil. Actually, that doesn't look, there we go. Okay, gotta make sure I don't go over that one finger I can see back there. Okay, so I've got the daffodil selected, Command Copy and Paste. Now let's take care of the face. Make sure we get that in the background. I'm going to make sure I get that shadow. It's cast underneath the hair. At this point I'm making sure to get anything that is exposed flesh, including her neck, and where there's sort of a cast shadow by the hair here, all the way up to her ear. Inside these little hairs here, all the way up to there. And then I'm going to hold in Shift and go around her hands as well. Okay, Command Copy and Paste. So at this point, if I turned off the background layer, I should be able to see anything that I missed. I think I missed some areas of hair and this area on her shirt. Make sure you are in the right layer when you do this. So there are going to be areas that are going to show through. It's not perfect. This is what happens when it's not perfect. There's going to be little areas that you miss. Okay? But it's alright. For our purposes, for this demonstration, I just want to show you how this is going to work. So I'm actually going to turn off all the layers except for one, whatever is at the top of my layer stack right now. I'm actually going to do this one first. Here's what we need to do. We're going to do this with each one of these layers in the layer stack. Okay, so I've moved a couple things around, and the first thing I want to do, I want to address this background layer that is the atmosphere back here. So there's a couple different ways you could do this. You could do it as a gradient overlay, Or what I tend to think is better is to use the gradient map. So I made a gradient map. See, it shows up like so. And I need to change it. I need to change my gradient. And I'm going to make darker region, something like this pea green color. In the lighter region, I get this kind of like sickeningly yellow-green. Hit OK. So you can see what it did there. It mapped out where it placed the color based on the values in the background. So now I'm going to do another one. This one's going to be for the trees. This time I'm coming back to that green. But I want to actually, let's go up to like a blue-green color. So what I did there is I merged down my first gradient map with that background color. And I like it. I think it looks pretty cool. Got two gradient maps now, and I'm going to merge that one down. Here we go. We got the hair. Let's do a gradient map for the hair. I want her hair to be a little brown, but also a little bit orange. I could actually add more variety here if I wanted to. I can hold the Option key and drag if I really wanted to, stretch out this gradient map and add more variation in tone. See what's happening there? It's stretching the color out, varying it a little bit more. So maybe I could come up here and add in areas of even lighter tone. Maybe here. More orange. Same with this one. And then maybe this one way down here I could get even darker. And see, it gives me more variety. And you can manipulate that by moving these boxes around. It'll change how much of that tone takes to different areas. I want to add a blending mode to this and see what happens. See, that actually pushes my contrast a little further. I kind of like that. I'm going to go back to the normal mode, but I'm going to drop the opacity a little bit. See, no, don't like it. So let's do the overlay. What I could do, just thinking, maybe I should duplicate the layer. Do the bottom one as an overlay. And then make this one. Yeah, that's better actually. Because that gives me a little bit more tone. It's not quite as stark as that. Gives me just a little bit more tone. It gives me the ability to manipulate it just a little bit more. I want her shirt to be blue. Maybe like a muted blue. Starting with my darkest areas first. And my lightest areas will be that same range, but there'll be more. Right about there. Maybe this needs to be darker. Down a little further on that scale. Yeah, that's better. I'll merge that down. Let's see what's next. I'm going to skip the daffodil and do that one last. Okay, we've got this part of the shirt. Let's do another gradient map for that. Be more purple. And I may have to Add a few more of these just because right now I'm not getting the variety of tone that I want. That's going to be a little better. See, I was able to add in a highlight and a mid-tone. We'll go with that. Merge that down. Okay, so now it's time to take care of her flesh tones. So for this, I'm going back to my gradient map and pick out some flesh tones for her. So the darkest areas, do something like that. My lightest regions will be like that, maybe a little bit more orange. And this is an example of where you definitely are going to need to pull some extra boxes to get some variety of tone. So coming back to this one, getting a little darker there. This one, maybe something a little bit more saturated. Well, don't worry if it's not exactly the colors you're going for. There's still manipulation to be done after these gradient maps. I'm going to say okay for that for now. And then all we have left is the daffodil. Do another gradient map. The value of the yellow. Okay. And then my lightest is going to be very saturated daffodil because I want to make sure that it looks like it's glowing. And then I can merge that down, bring back all those colors, and now you see I have everything mapped out using those gradient maps that I created. I can merge that down on the daffodil. Now granted, everything at this point is in its own layer, and I still have the background layer as well. I'm going to try something here. I unlocked that background layer. What happens if I put it at the top of the layer stack and then use the multiply filter? See, that makes it look really gloomy and dark. But that's not what I want. I'm going to bring it back down to where it was. And maybe what I'll do is duplicate it, put one at the top, and then change the opacity. See if I like how I'm getting like this, a little bit more of a glow effect now from that. Now there's more to be done. There's more to be layered on top of this, painted, effects added. Before I do any of that, I am going to save this. So if you were to do this in process, this would be a good time to save it. And then once it's saved, come back and go ahead and flatten the image. And I'm going to do a duplicate layer now. And in this layer, I'm going to add color. So it's going to be a color layer blending mode. And this is when I could come in and add a little bit of lighting effect if I wanted. So maybe I'll come over and sample some of that bright yellow from the daffodil. Make my brush pretty big here. And I can come back on top of what I've already done, and the tone will show through, and it's going to enable me to add the color of my light source on top of what I've already got there. And back over all of these areas where there's light hitting her face, her hair, sides of her fingers. Now doing this in a color blending mode layer. Now I can come over and adjust the opacity if I like, because maybe it's interfering a little too much with the underlying colors, which it was. So I brought it down just a little bit. I'm going to do another one of those color layers, because there's still some things missing color-wise that I'd like to add in. And I'm going to put this one underneath that yellow layer, through the center of the face where a lot of blood vessels are close to the surface of the skin, and that's why your nose and your ears and your cheeks a little bit more red, like the tips of your fingers. As light passes through these areas of your skin, and you can see blood vessels and things like that through it. So that I'm going to blur a little bit. I like adding in these areas of tone, because flesh has so many different colors in it. It's not one color, it's always a lot of different colors. So now I can come back in and maybe address her eyes. I feel like those might need a little bit of extra work. I'm going to do this as an overlay. I'm going to jump back to my black and white. The brush a little smaller. I like the idea of them being very bright. And then I can up the opacity just a little bit on that. So they really stand out. Make sure that's in your top layer so that you can really see what's going on here. Coming in, and I'm using this overlay layer to just reinforce some of my brightest values. And you see now, I'm sure, if you haven't already done something like this before, done some painting on your own, you see now the layering process is time-consuming. It requires some real scrutiny in order to create the effect you're looking for. That's what I like about this overlay blending mode, just being able to come in and tint and shade areas, putting certain areas out that were not noticeable before. Some of the color in her hair can come back out. Some of these little subtle values over here. And I'm going to blur that as well. Maybe it needs to be taken further. Let's take a look at our Gaussian Blur where we have it set. Let's see how far we want to take. I like this, the little bit of roughness to it, a little bit of a textural quality. And come back in here and smudge some of this red up into her forehead. See how it's starting to blend? It's starting to all kind of come together a little bit at a time. You see it developing right before your eyes. And if you don't have a lot of experience painting, this is what painting's like. It's just we're doing it in the digital realm. So we're layering, building up value, building up tone. We have these subdermal colors. A little bit more for chin there. So I'm liking this so far. At this point, maybe you want to save it. I'm just going to flatten because I don't care, because I'm just going to keep going here. I'm going to add a duplicate layer. I do like to every once in a while do something like this to see what an overlay layer would look like and how much more extreme my values get when I do that. I'm not liking that too much, so I'm going to stick with what I have right now. And I'm doing another overlay layer. Brighten certain areas up a little bit. And I want to keep reinforcing the fact that this daffodil is glowing. I'm actually going to come right around the outside of the daffodil this time. Add super glow, intense glow. Now it's really bright. And again, coming back to the Gaussian Blur, just to soften it out a little bit. It needs to go further than that again. Okay. You could double up an overlay layer. Look at that. See, it really adds the glow. It's glowing more and more. Obviously, I don't want all that. That isn't too bad. It's still maybe too quick of a jump from there to there. Maybe soften it down a little bit. Let's do another overlay layer. You're probably getting sick of doing these, but I love doing them. I could do them all day long. I have fun with this. Make my brush a little bit bigger and push the contrast of what's behind her a little bit more. And I am gonna do a Gaussian blur on this eventually, so don't worry that it's so dark you can't see anything. I'm just doing this to create a little bit of separation, just to see how it's gonna look. I'm going to jump to my smudge tool and make it a little smaller. Okay, so let's blur that out a little. And let's reduce the opacity on it a little bit. I like it a little bit darker. You may not. You may like that misty quality that it had going on. That's fine. To each their own. We all have our personal preferences when it comes to this sort of thing. So now I want to do another duplicate layer, and this time I'm going to see what some of these artistic filters look like on top. Just because I'm interested to see how Photoshop interprets what I'm doing. So there's the cutout effect. And remember, you can apply these in a duplicate layer and then use a blending mode so that you can see part of the effect and part of the underlying image if that's something you want to try. I may actually do that because I am very fond of the cutout filter. I know it's like, you're such a hack, you're using that filter, but I like it. I think it looks cool. And I like what it does to my work. It's interesting. So let's try blending mode. And if we do multiply, oh, it's too dark. How about, what if we do a color burn? Oh, way too dark. How about a linear burn? See, you just work your way through these, see what they look like, see if you like any of them. Screen effect, I'm not a fan of. Light didn't seem to change it too much. Color dodge is way too saturated. Try the overlay. Nope, too much. Soft light's alright, hard light's too strong, vivid light's too strong. It's a little bit muddy. I don't like how muddy that is. I don't mind that one. It's subtle. Maybe a secondary blending mode on top. And then lower the opacity. Huh? No, don't like that. It's just too stark and I'm losing too much of the hair. But I like that filter. I think it adds a little something. Let me drop the opacity just a little bit on it. Merge it down. Now I'm going to go and do one more duplicate layer. Let's go J.J. Abrams on this and add a lens flare to it. How about that? Put a lens flare here at the top of the daffodil. It adds these circular distortions of light. It's like there's a lens taking the picture. And then maybe I'll come back in. You see what I did there? I added just a white blotch right on top of her eyes. I think I like that. It kind of adds to the look of surprise. Flatten my image. And then there's one more thing I'd like to do, because it's starting to bug me, and maybe it bugs you too. I noticed that one of her eyes just wasn't as open as the other. So I needed to make her eye just a little bigger on that side, and then the one on this side is not dark enough around the pupil. So I'm just going to come in and make sure that that area is darkened a little bit. Her pupils are not lining up for me. I feel like I need to fix them a little bit. Now I'm going to do that with my elliptical marquee tool. Okay, I like it better now. It has like a reflective, jittery quality to her eyes. And then maybe I can add a couple of smaller lens flares to her eyes, just to show that they're really reflecting that right there. So I think it's done, or at least it's as done as it's going to get as far as I'm concerned, because I'm done with it. Maybe I want to come in here and do a little bit of smudging. Could do that to add more variety to her hair. But you saw this from start to finish pretty much, and really there is a lot more that I could do to soften and tone and get rid of hard edges and just make it look really good. But that's the nature of painting and illustrating, is that it takes time. It takes multiple hours. I spent less than 3 hours on this total. So it's really not as good as it could be. But it's good enough to show you what's possible in terms of gradient maps on top of digital paintings. Now you could do something similar to what I showed you if you want to. You can do a drawing, do the gray fill layer with a multiply blending mode, and then use burn and dodge or paint in black and white to develop value. Or maybe you have an old drawing lying around that you could take a photo of or scan and try the gradient mapping on top of it. Or you could try it with a black and white photo. You could even take a photo that is not black and white, desaturate it, and then come in here and add gradient maps to it, just to see if you understand the process of gradient mapping as an adjustment layer and what it can do to the separate parts of your image. So if you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to email me. That's what I've got for you today. I hope it was fun. Maybe we'll try some landscapes next time. All right, see you later.